What's up, hockey fans? Welcome to the Wraparound, brought to you by the Hockey News and presented by Sticks.com. I'm your host, Emma Lingan. I am joined today by Michael Augello and Stephen Kerr, and we are here to talk about all of the latest and greatest storylines from around the NHL. One of the final weeks here, guys, where we actually don't have live hockey games to talk about, whether it's preseason or camp or anything. We're actually getting close to real hockey here. It's so close. So hang with us. We've still got plenty to talk about until then. Before we do, though, just want to remind you that we are brought to you by our friends at Sticks.com. Why break the bank on sticks when you can get pro level composite sticks without the pro price tag at Sticks.com? That's STIX.com. Head over now and gear up without the markup. All right, we're going to start today with Michael's favorite topic. I can just see him getting so excited. The Toronto Maple Leafs. The Maple Leafs have signed a goaltender. They signed 24-year-old goaltender Dennis Hildeby to a 3-year contract. So what's interesting about it is that it's a two-way contract for the first 2 years of the deal. And then the final year is a one-way deal. So that would be for the 2027-28 season. So if anyone is unfamiliar, Hildeby had a great 2023-24 season in the AHL. He had a .913 save percentage, a 2.41 goals against average. That said, he struggled the following season. That would be this most recent season. He put up an .878 percentage through his first 6 NHL games and then saw his AHL save percentage drop down to .908. So is this a sign, again, keeping in mind that he is on now this 3-year contract that is a one-way deal for the final year? Mike, is this a sign that Brad Treliving thinks that Hildeby is going to be part of the Maple Leafs' future plans?
I think this deal was an insurance policy. They similarly signed Joseph Woll to a 3-year deal coming out of his ELC a few years back, and then they signed him to an extension last year. Hildeby was a 4th-round pick in 2022, a big kid who had double hip surgery because he grew, I think, 6'7", and put up really good stats in the SHL and really good stats in his first year in the American Hockey League. I believe he was an AHL all-rookie team player. Last year, I think he did not benefit from the sort of yo-yoing back and forth from the NHL to the AHL. Plus, they had a 3-pronged situation with the Marlies with Archer Akhtiamov and Matt Murray. And Matt Murray is gone now. So I think this contract is a reflection of Hildeby being the number 3 behind Stolarz and Joseph Woll. And he's waiver exempt, so they don't have to worry about somebody like Murray getting claimed on waivers. They like him. They think he's a good young goaltender, but he's going to have to battle. There are 3 Russian goaltenders in the system for the Leafs: Akhtiamov, Peksa, and a kid that is still over in Russia. So Hildeby has a little heat on him to start performing at a higher level. Otherwise, these guys are going to blow past him on the depth chart.
Yeah, Stephen, any thoughts? Do you think that Hildeby is going to be able to stick with the Leafs here for the long haul?
Well, it certainly buys them more time to see what Hildeby has. Now, his NHL debut last year didn't go so well. I think he allowed 6 goals, but he did win 3 games after that. And, the Leafs certainly hope they won't need him right away, because that would mean either Stolarz or Joseph Woll are injured. So they don't want to count on him right now. But, I think it's good for both sides. Although, the going back and forth, some guys have more trouble with it than others. But it's certainly good for the Leafs, to have that 2-way deal for the first couple of years. And then it becomes the 1-way, as you mentioned, the 3rd year. So I think they just want to see what do they really have in this guy, give him a bigger sample size, and then go from there. But, it's just hard to tell. He didn't have a great debut, but he did at least show some flashes last year.
Yeah, and you can never have too much goaltending, right? Definitely, every team needs good goaltending, so you can never have
like pitchers in baseball. Yeah, it's the same with goalies.
That's right. Exactly. Sticking with the Leafs, Brad Treliving did an interview with Pierre Lebrun of The Athletic. He was talking about the team's salary cap situation. So they currently have just under $2 million in cap space, not a ton. But he said to Pierre Lebrun, quote, "We're not rushing out to use it, but if it made sense, we'd certainly look at doing something," end quote. So again, it's not a ton of wiggle room to work with, but still, Mike, do you think that the Leafs should be using their cap space to focus on making the team immediately better this year, or should they be saving up everything they have for the 2026 free agent class?
Well, I mean, there's some flexibility still, and there's been a lot of talk about them trading David Camp or Kalle Järnkrok, or sending one or either one of them down to the AHL to bury a little over $1 million in cap room. It's funny that Darren Ferris, the agent for Matt Grzelcyk, he didn't mention Grzelcyk by name, but he said that he talked to Treliving about one of his clients, and Grzelcyk is one of the yet unsigned unrestricted free agents out there who had 40 points last year, and said, well, we've been talking to the Leafs about someone that I represent. Grzelcyk doesn't make much sense to Toronto, but Roslovic, who we've talked about, Jack Roslovic, who we've talked about a lot, I think there's still a chance that he signs with Toronto. And if that may depend on whether they can move Camp or Järnkrok. In terms of their cap space for 2026, the cap goes up, because they traded Mitch Marner, traded in the sign and trade to clear that salary. They have $24 million in cap space with the cap projected for 2026. So a guy wears number 97 in Edmonton. If he decides he wants to go unrestricted on July 1st, 2026, there's a lot of money there.
There is a lot of money there. Even if it's not a guy who wears 97 in Edmonton, I think that they could certainly do some damage with that. Stephen, what's your opinion on this? You think that the Leafs should be a little bit more aggressive in trying to make their team better right now, or is it better to maybe play the long game here?
Well, I was actually going to ask Mike about, what he felt, with the negotiating with Stolarz, that's coming up. Lawton is entering the final season of his $15 million deal that he signed back when he was with Philly. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see kind of what those, come about with those. And, you mentioned they've got some bottom six forwards. Järnkrok, I think, has a $2.1 million cap hit. So it's going to depend on a lot of that if they free up some more space to make a bigger move in the immediate future.
I think they want to re-sign Lawton. Lawton's a Toronto area kid. I definitely think that depending on how he does this year, Matthias Maselli, if he has some success playing in the top six, they probably want to resign him. With Stolarz, again, the availability is the most important ability that he needs to show. And consistently, he's been hurt every year. And he got hurt in the playoffs last year. He got hurt during the regular season. He had a great year, but I think that his inability to stay healthy will mitigate what he earns either from the Leafs on a new deal or on the open market. So I think they're going to have cap space, and I think they're going to spend it either on some of those guys or in a combination with somebody in free agency.
Nothing with the Leafs is simple, though. We know that, right?
Well, that's a great segue. Speaking of things that are not simple, let's talk about Quinn Hughes and his situation in Vancouver. So obviously he is going to be coming up on a contract year next year. He actually said in a recent interview, he did an interview with Ian McIntyre from Sportsnet, talking about his future with the team. So this is what he said, quote, "I'm very present. I can't even sign for another year, so there's nothing I can do. As far as the noise regarding his future, I can handle the noise. That's why I'm the captain of the team, because I can handle these things and I can play at an elite level, and it doesn't matter what's going on around me." He then went on to say, who knows how I'll be feeling this time next year. It's still a year away. So A lot of chatter around Quinn Hughes and a lot of pressure on the Canucks to build a competitive team around him to convince him to stay once his contract is up. There's been plenty of chatter about him going to join his brothers in New Jersey. So there's still that to consider as well. But Mike, overall, what do you make of these comments from Quinn Hughes?
He's not committing to anything, and he doesn't have to commit to anything because, as he said, he's 2 years out from unrestricted free agency. He's a year out from being able to sign an extension. If I had to gamble, I don't think he signs an extension with the Canucks. I think he plays it out to the very end, either to extract more money out of them or to go to New Jersey and play with Luke and play with Jack. I mean, if the Vancouver Canucks are proactive, they say, well, I want to get you signed to a contract. And if they can't get him signed to a contract on July 1st, on July 2nd, I'm talking to New Jersey and saying, okay, what do you give me? Or I put it out there for all these other teams out there and say, Quinn Hughes is a Norris Trophy caliber defenseman. Give me your best offer because I know for a fact he's going to walk away in the summer of 2027. And, we need to trade him now and get the most we can for him.
Yeah, Stephen, what do you think? What do you make of these comments about, him talking about how he can handle the noise? But I mean, the noise is only going to get louder as the year goes on.
Yeah, well, you're going to put him to the test for sure this year. But, if he can handle all the noise of the infighting and disappointments of last season, I guess contract extension speculation should be a piece of cake for him, right? But no, it's only going to get louder. Now, the Canucks would certainly like to wrap him up as soon as possible, certainly before the CBA kicks in. But honestly, if I were him, I'd hold out as long as possible. And if the season goes off the rails like last year did, he certainly would be in no hurry to sign an extension. So I think he's actually in a good position. But yeah, you're right. The noise is only going to get louder.
Yeah. And like Mike said, I mean, he isn't committing to anything. I think that's very smart. He doesn't need to commit to anything, being very diplomatic with his answers as a good captain is. So I think that's probably all we're going to hear from him about it. But I think that, it'll be a situation to keep an eye on this season. Shifting over to Edmonton. So Stuart Skinner talked to the media on Thursday about his goals for the upcoming season. He said, quote, "I want to get off to a hot start. I want to go to the Olympics. I want to be a goaltender for Team Canada. I want to be able to get back to the Stanley Cup and finish the job this year." So this is quite the bold statement. Quite the bold claim from Stuart Skinner. Obviously, very hot and cold, hit or miss, up and down goaltending performance with Edmonton through the last couple of playoffs. He, of course, lost his starter's net, got it back, lost it again. It's just really been a roller coaster with him. So of all those things that he says that he wants to accomplish this year, Mike, what do you think is more likely to happen? Do you think it's going to be more likely that he wins the cup with the Oilers or that he makes Team Canada's roster for the Olympics, and why?
Can I vote none of the above?
Sure.
Yeah, I was trying to do the same, actually.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, if you want to go to the Olympics, buy a flight and a ticket to Milano Cortina. There are 360 million Americans out there that are praying that Stuart Skinner is the goalie for Team Canada. Will he be one of the three? No, I can't, unless there's an injury. And I don't think he's fourth or fifth. I think it's going to be, Binnington, Hill, and Montembeault. Maybe Logan Thompson mixes in. Maybe Mackenzie Blackwood mixes in. I think he's sixth or seventh on the depth chart. So now, could they get back to the Stanley Cup final? Sure. I don't know if they're going to win it. Edmonton is thinner this year than they were last year. They're really going to have to hope that guys like Isaac Howard and Matthew Savoy come through and fill in for some of those veteran players that left via free agency. So I'm voting none of the above. I don't think he's going to be on Team Canada, and I don't think the Edmonton Oilers are getting anywhere close to a Stanley Cup.
All right, Stephen, you also think none of the above?
Well, I'm going to take the compromise angle here. I think he has a better chance of getting back to the Cup final than he does to make the Olympic team for Canada. I mean, all those names that you just mentioned, Mike, I mean, every single one of them has more wins, has a better stat line all across the board. So it would, I guess it would help his cause if he gets off to a hot start this season, and then Doug Armstrong, the Canadiens GM, would have a tough decision to make. But yeah, I just think he's got too many behind him. I mean, you'd have to have a whole slew of injuries for him, I'd say, to even be number 3. So yeah, I think he has a better chance to get back to the Cup final than any of the other options we've talked about.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think if there are enough injuries to where Stuart Skinner makes the Olympic roster, I think we've got bigger problems on our hands. There's some sort of goaltender epidemic going around. But yeah, definitely, I think a better chance of getting back to the Cup final, maybe third time's a charm, although it's not looking too promising for the Oilers. But hey, you never know. Let's go over to another team that maybe surprised some folks this year and really kind of burst out onto the scene in the playoff scene. That would be the Montreal Canadiens. So, of course, Lane Hutson, rookie defenseman this past season, won the Calder Trophy. He had 66 points in 82 games. So that was his rookie season. Now, of course, there's always talk of a sophomore slump and things like that, but do you think, Mike, that he'll at least get to that rookie point total next year? Now, for reference, the Hockey News Fantasy Guide predicts him to be at 59 points, so just a little below. And then BetMGM has set the over-under at 65.5. So where do you think he falls in that next year?
Sophomore slump is always a consideration. The league adjusting to a player is always a consideration. The fact that Noah Dobson, who they brought in from the Islanders, could steal power play time from Lane Hutson, although I think Hutson probably will be the power play guy, although you have to factor in the fact that, the Canadiens need to get Hutson signed on a new contract. So do they want him to put up totals like that when they, maybe want to get him on a cheaper deal or even a bridge deal? If I had to bet, I would bet slightly lower than the over-under from BetMGM. I think he's probably going to be in the high 50s, maybe at 60, 61 points, but 66 2 years in a row. If he does that, then, he's definitely going to be, in Norris consideration in terms of just his offensive abilities.
Yeah. What about you, Stephen? What do you think? Do you think that he comes close to that or matches it? Or do you think that maybe Lane Hutson takes a little bit of a step back offensively?
Well, right now, I think his biggest concern is maybe he needs to talk to his dad about the comments he made about being left off Team USA's orientation camp roster. But no, the sophomore slump is always a possibility. And I think, I'm not tooting our own horn, but I guess I am. The Hockey News Fantasy probably has it right. One of the biggest reasons that he tied Larry Murphy's record for most assists by a rookie in the regular season last year was just his ability to create opportunities and moving the puck from the blue line. That certainly was one of the big reasons that he was able to do that. And the other was he had 22:44 of ice time, an average of that last year. And Mike, you mentioned Dobson might cutting down on his power play time. Well, he could cut down Hudson's time on ice too. So that could alter the numbers a bit. I'm going to go out on a limb and say I don't know that he's going to have a sophomore slump. I'd say he could go at least above 60. But yeah, getting past 66, which is what he had last year, I think it's attainable, but it's going to, I think, depend on those factors of whether he can get back to that. And as you said, they don't necessarily have to have that kind of production from him.
Yeah, but it is going to be interesting to see. Maybe he'll be playing with a chip on his shoulder for not being invited to Team USA's orientation camp. You never know. Of course, you've got the Canadiens really at the start, at the beginning of their contention window here. We've got another team now I want to talk about that's kind of on the other end of the spectrum. That's the Pittsburgh Penguins. They are, fully committed to this rebuild now, obviously under Kyle Dubas. They are now really touting this youth movement that they want to kind of start to bring up the next generation of future stars in Pittsburgh. But of course, it's hard to do that. It's hard to toe that line when you have the youth movement that you want to bring these young players up and see what they can do. But then you still have Evgeny Malkin, Kris Letang, Erik Karlsson. You have all those guys still under contract right now. And that's not even mentioning Sidney Crosby, but we're going to leave Crosby out of this conversation for right now just because his contract doesn't fall into this category. But do you think that the Penguins need to wait out the contracts of Malkin, Letang, Karlsson? I mean, there's been a lot of talk about potentially trading Karlsson, but they would have to retain salary. I mean, Mike, what do you think? Do you think they need to wait out those contracts before they really kick off this youth movement? Or do you think that they can try and push toward long-term success now with those guys still on the roster?
I did a double take when I looked at the Penguins roster and saw that they have more unrestricted free agents than they have players under contract for next season. And two of the players are that are under contract are names that we've heard consistently in terms of trade rumors, and Brian Rust and Rickard Rakell, and another one in Novak, who you know very well from Nashville, Emma. I mean, I think they have to convert Malkin and Letang, if they have any trade value, into assets before the deadline, if Malkin has or Letang has anything left in the tank. With Karlsson, I mean, they're $50 million under the cap next year, with the cap projected. So you could retain $5 million. You actually probably would like to retain more if it was in the CBA to be able to do so. But retaining $5 million, Kyle Dubas will be more than glad to do that because they need to get to the cap floor. But their situation is he's going to be a seller at the deadline. He's going to be a big seller. He's going to take salaries back. He's going to get draft picks for taking those salaries back. It's going to be Harper's Bazaar of trades and acquisitions by Kyle Dubas before the deadline.
I mean, you do wonder at some point, the Penguins have been just racking up all of these draft picks over the last couple of years. At some point, you got to start using them and converting them into actual talent. So it's kind of, you question at this point, do they need more draft capital or do they need more maybe prospects, young players? I mean, Stephen, what do you think about the situation that they're in right now? Do they try and go for it right now? Do you think they need to wait until they get rid of these contracts?
Well, it's interesting you just brought that up because I was actually going to hit on that. Is I think they kept all of their 2025 draft picks, which I think surprised some people. And they have some prospects like McGroarty and Koivunen and Hollander, that are kind of on the periphery that could make the roster. And I'd say, speaking of the Predators, I don't know if you agree with this or not, but the Penguins kind of in a similar position as the Predators and some other teams of trying to strike that balance between maintaining a veteran presence yet getting younger. And the Penguins are certainly in that position. So yeah, I'm kind of with Mike that I think the deadline is going to tell a lot about what they do to get some more core pieces for a consistent playoff run. But you can always stockpile more draft picks, but that just leaves you, I guess, more room to trade some of them, and maybe get some more established veterans. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting. I think the trade deadline is where you're going to see a lot of action with the Penguins coming up.
Yeah, definitely. I think that, like Mike had mentioned, there were a couple names there that we've been hearing about for over a year now. We're going to still keep hearing about them probably until they are traded. So will, like you said, probably be a very busy team on the trade market this upcoming season. Want to shift topics here. I want to wrap up today talking about the New York Rangers. So we were just talking about Pittsburgh, their former coach, Mike Sullivan, now with the Rangers. The Rangers are going to be gearing up for their centennial year. They've got a commemorative logo at center ice. So centennial year. I mean, that's pretty remarkable to think they've been around for 100 years now. So looking back over now all 10 decades of the Rangers' existence, I want to do a little reflecting here. Now, Mike, I'm of course not insinuating that you have been around for all 10 of them, but in your opinion, what was the best decade for the Rangers in their 100-year history?
It's tough to say, a decade in which you didn't win a Stanley Cup would be the best in your franchise's history. So I battled back and forth between the 70s when they went to 2 Cup finals. 72, they lost to Bobby Orr and the Bruins. And in the late 70s, they lost the 4th Cup in a row to the Montreal Canadiens. But, I'll go more closer to home, the 90s with the 94 Stanley Cup win over Vancouver. And then when Gretzky went to New York, they went to the conference final and lost to Erik Lindros and the Flyers in 97. There were a couple of years where they didn't make the playoffs in that decade. But this is a franchise that has had long stretches where they've, missed the playoffs. So I would, by a hair, I would say the 90s over the 70s.
All right. That's a good pick. Steven, what do you think? Best decade of the Rangers?
Well, when I first saw this question, the first thought that popped into my head was Stan Fischler. I mean, I'd love to pick the hockey maven's brain about what he thinks, but you're probably right on, Mike. I mean, it's hard to argue with the 90s team that won the Cup. And I realize, the 2010s, they had some good teams there. I'm probably dating myself here, but I'm actually old enough to remember not the 72 team. I was a little bit too little there, when they got to the finals in 72. But that 79 team, I mean, they, and in the late 70s, even when they had some of those epic series with their crosstown rival, the New York Islanders, and, they kept knocking off the Islanders until, of course, the Islanders started winning all those Stanley Cups in the 80s. But man, it's hard to argue with the 70s, but I think the 90s certainly would do it. But boy, John Davidson in 79, I mean, I just remember how, they just, that epic series in the Islanders probably made them run out of gas in the final. But obviously the Canadiens were just too good. Nobody was going to beat them. But yeah, I'd have to say you're right. But the 70s teams, I'd say, especially the late 70s, would be right up there.
Yeah, that 79 team was the last team to beat the Islanders before they won their 4 straight cups. And they lost to the Canadiens, who were they had won the last of their 4 straight cups. So they were sort of like in that middle road there between the 2 dynasties.
Well, definitely plenty of history, lots of great memories, and lots to look back on there in New York as they get ready to celebrate their centennial season. So I'm sure that we'll be doing a lot more reflecting on the Rangers of years past as we move forward with this season. But for now, that is going to do it for today's episode of the Wraparound. Thank you to everyone who tuned in to listen and talk some hockey with us. We do appreciate it. Thank you, as always, to Stix.com for sponsoring us. For Mike Augello and Stephen Kerr, I'm Emma Lingan. This is the Wraparound, and we will see you next time.